The very scary and mysterious case of serial killer Bible John terrorised Glasgow. He was known to frequent the Barrowlands, where there was a bit of ballroom dancing and stuff like that. There's a photo fit of him, and as the press made it, the nickname Bible John.
Yeah.
As I said, still unsolved to this day. They're looking to put a connection between modern serial killers like Peter Tobin and Angus Sinclair.
Yeah.
That goes into one of the suspects in the Bible John killings is Peter Tobin, as we said.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was back in 2007 when he murdered Polish student Angelika Kluk in Glasgow. That would then lead on to another 2 bodies being found. Those 2 girls was Vicky Hamilton and Dana McNichol, but the 2 of them were buried in the same back garden.
Yeah.
Again with Angus Sinclair. He would then go on to be convicted of another 2 murders known as the World's End killings. 2 girls were only 17 years old. Strangulation with the tights, rape, murder, discarded. That's what I wanted to ask you anyway. Who do you think is Bible John?
Well,
the legend himself, John Wedger, welcome to the show.
thank you so much for having me back.
It's always great to see you, John, especially having you in Glasgow.
Up the road, as they say.
Yeah, such a treat for the audience watching.
Yeah, no, it's a treat for me as well. I enjoy coming up here. I'm always looked after, and I get recognised up here as well, which is strange, isn't it? All this way, and people recognise me, So.
Brilliant. I'm looking forward to this episode. I believe it'll be a real blockbuster, a big story in Glasgow. So we're going to go into the story of Bible John, a mysterious serial killer that operated in the late 60s in Glasgow, but more about the connection to the more modern serial killers that operated in the same area.
Yeah.
But before we go into this story, if you can speak us through what's going on in the now and the present.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's highs and lows. It's peaks and troughs, and I get quiet time. So I was very, very quiet for about 6 weeks. Didn't go on social media. Didn't when people start to contact me, you okay? And so it's good because you've got that sort of virtual family, as it were. And you don't realise how much people do sort of look forward to your content. I sort of underestimate that sometimes, and I get recognised in the street quite a bit. People coming up to me and thanking me. You do get the occasional nutcase, but that's part of the territory, isn't it? Because we're dealing with such an emotive topic, and child abuse is at the heart of so much mental health issues anyway. But that's it. Just wait for the release of my book. Hopefully that will be soon. Every now and then I'm getting asked for quotes for the newspaper. I'm getting the national newspapers every now and then. My opinion on various bits and pieces that are topical and relevant. And the child abuse stuff will always keep coming back in, always. As much as it goes away, as much as sometimes the establishment, the UK establishment, wants it to go away, it will always resurface. It ain't going anywhere. However, the survivor community, they want this exposed. They want justice, which brings about their healing. But will it ever get fully exposed is a question I get asked, and I'm saying no, it won't. You'll never stop it, and you'll never fully expose it. Where does it begin? Where does it end? Well, it starts in the home, and then it ends up at the heart of the British establishment, and maybe the global establishment now. It's the root cause of virtually everything that is wrong in this world is child abuse. You take it out of the picture, society will heal quickly, and to a degree of probably 80% of criminality will stop. Bold statement, but I believe that's true. But there is no appetite, especially with the British establishment, and maybe in Europe and globally, to prevent this. I think the more we open borders and this freedom of movement, the more we will facilitate the movement of kids from country to country. So, but let's just hope it comes back into topic. And again, like I always say, it's a conversation no one wants, but it's a conversation we should all have. So that's that. But yeah, it's getting busy times again, Jim. Been quiet, but getting busy again.
Good to hear, John. Let's go right into the case then. The very scary and mysterious case of serial killer Bible John terrorised Glasgow in the late 60s. He was known to frequent the Barrowlands, where there was a bit of ballroom dancing and stuff like that. There's a photo fit of him, and as the press made it, the nickname Bible John,
Yeah.
the terrifying photo fit. And as I said, still unsolved to this day. But I don't know what your experience is with serial killers, but his MO was strangulation, rape, and then just discarding the body.
Yeah.
But there's a connection between, like I said, well, they're looking to put a connection between modern serial killers like Peter Tobin and Angus Sinclair.
Yeah.
So it was just to get a real opinion and insight into the Bible John story.
Yeah, I mean, serial killing, there's a prescribed amount of people in a prescribed amount of time, which renders a serial killer. And then, of course, it's got to be the MO, which is a modus operandi and methodology. But what I find with things, I look for algorithms, I look for patterns. And in this period, this 60s through to the 70s and that, we're looking at post-war Britain. And there was a lot of this going on throughout the UK. And then we're looking at what was Britain post-war, well, heavily traumatised nation that's licking its wounds through two of the biggest wars that's ever occurred, in which Britain played a major part. They were the only nation to be first in and last to leave. And then prior to the First World War, Britain had just picked itself up from the Napoleonic conflicts. In 1963, the empire collapsed. The First World War had depleted most of our working age men, and the Second World War, you know, they were just recovering from it, had taken away the last reserves of cash. So Britain was in a bad place. And the children's homes had sprung up as a massive industry. There was a need to facilitate the care for these children. There was a lot of kids that were homeless, that were orphaned, or they were in poverty, in domestic circumstances with very, very damaged parents and grandparents that had lived through terrible, terrible wars. Alcoholism was a big thing and a big deal. And then those that were working in the care system, in these children's homes, these residential industrial schools that were throughout the UK, were a lot of damaged people in there, and a lot of paedophiles had got themselves into these places as well. And there were some of the homes, I mean, one in the northeast of England called Medhamsley, which operated from 61 through to 85. Thousands and thousands of young men went to this approved school, and near enough every single one was abused. And every single member of staff knew about what was going on, if not involved in it. So got this massive amount of dysfunctionality, children that ended up becoming very emotionally broken adults, damaged people. And some of them ended up with military training because, you know, conscription started to phase out in the 50s and things like that. So they come from strict discipline backgrounds, but were very, very broken. And that may well have been contributing factors to some of these monsters that were out there. So Peter Tobin was incredibly well known, infamous, and had connections to England, especially to Kent, you know. And of course, he had connected himself with the church as well, and used alias names and everything else to sort of ingratiate himself with his various Christian communities, where he went on to abuse and kill. And then when you're looking at Bible John, the strangulation and the rape and then the murder, I mean, you see this pattern so much. It's brutal. There's no regard for humanity, and there's a selfishness to it. And then discarding it like it's nothing, but then carrying on. And you tend to find there's a transient nature to these people as well. They'll establish themselves somewhere, commit these crimes, then move on. And what people have started to do is looking, you know, at the forensic element of the offending and looking for patterns and profiling geographically and psychologically these people, was before they didn't do it. And like we mentioned in earlier shows, police forces now are more national and will have this working agreement that they will share information, and some even have these computer indices that are cross counties, cross force, which they can look at national information and not local information. Whereas before, everything was kept very, very tight, and they didn't really look at a regional movement of crime. You know, you do get these regional crime squads that have been established for a little while, but they're sort of a recent thing in policing history, you know. So information didn't move about like it used to. So if someone was to just move to another county, they're pretty much in effect like in another country, as it were. But you just got to follow the patterns where these people are, and it's usually a really good indicator of what you're dealing with. One of the things that we looked at was the fairgrounds and how perverts would link themselves up with these travelling families. And the fairgrounds have to prescribe to a register, a national register, and they have to then make it public knowledge of where they're going, and their route is available for scrutiny if you want to look at it. And I know one guy that's what he did. He got the routes of some of these fairgrounds, and this was mainly linked to a guy called Sidney Cook, an infamous child murderer, prolific child murderer, and connected to a group called the Dirty Dozen. There was about 5 of them convicted, but they believed it was a bigger syndicate, more of an organised, what we now term as a paedophile ring. And I think what we've got to start looking at is this connectivity. Is Bible John one person, or is it more than one person? Is it a collective of people, you know? And sometimes people don't look at that. They'll put it down and stigmatise just one individual. It's down to this. And once you start doing that, you can narrow down your focus. But one of the things that you did mention to me was one of the murders that occurred, and one of the suspects for Bible John claimed to be in prison, but it turned out it had been released on a day release system. Now, this is one of the MOs that the corrupt police officers used to use. They would get a production order for a prisoner, an armed robber, take them out and go on armed robberies with the prisoner, right, and then share the money. And he would never be a suspect because the paperwork for the production would go missing. And as far as anyone's concerned, the prisoner was locked up doing time. It's only when they looked into it, well, actually the police came and booked him out for a day, took him on an armed robbery. So it's always been one of the greatest ways of covering things up. Well, I couldn't have done me because I was in prison that day. Couldn't have been me.
This story is of Angus Sinclair, and I think he's overlooked in this case. But we'll get into the murders that he committed later on in the 70s, the World's End later.
Yeah.
But his MO was the exact same as Bible John. And the reason that he was overlooked was back in 1961, he murdered a 7-year-old girl, and he only served 6 years for it. And then he was released in 1968, the same year with the first Bible John killing. But they said that he was released in April, and the first killing happened in February. So it couldn't have been him. But they didn't explain what you were talking about, the fact that he was on home leave prior to his release. So he definitely had the opportunity.
Yeah.
And coincidence or not, as soon as he is released, these killings start happening in Glasgow, bearing the same MO as his later killings. So it's very...
There's a saying about the mind, it's like a parachute. It only works best when it's open. And sometimes people get this closed mind. And if you've got a closed mind and you're running an inquiry as a senior officer, what you're going to expect, instruct your men to do, you're going to be blinkered and tunnel vision down one path. But now I think things are opening out a lot more. They're looking at more like the FBI style of policing and profiling. But you can imagine what it must be like, in Europe, where you can just travel country to country. They've found children have turned up in Holland and Belgium that are British kids from the care system. It's happened a lot. And again, you seem to see around the 70s, and that seemed to be the heyday of paedophilic murders in this country. Where have these people come from? Well, a lot of them were byproducts of the care system and abuse. Now, there's one guy that massively gets underlooked, and his name is Brian Lunn Fields. And he was in the care system. And he was actually come to notice very young for abusing other kids. He was a bully. He went on and joined the Royal Marines and become a commando. And when he left there, he went on to abduct and murder children. He was married, but he was murdering boys, and he was a sadistic homosexual paedophile, a murderous one at that. And this guy then would get himself jobs that would take him all around the country. So he got a job with the Milk Marketing Board, which took him to Yorkshire, to Lancashire, and he was abducting. He abducted 2 children in Scotland. I don't know exactly where it was, but he abducted and he abused them. And he was the only man in the British justice system that was actually serving time for abducting 2 kids at once. But nothing was connecting. And we started looking at the case independently, and we managed to get a bit of land excavated in looking for 2 missing children from the Birmingham area. And then a detective that was from West Midlands that was on the crime, before he left, he said, look, there's huge corruption involved in this case. And we found it very difficult to liaise with the West Midlands police. They were rude, if nothing else, They were insulting to us, and we were professional guys, ex-detective. We had a very well-known celebrity, ex-SAS soldier, helping us as well, and professional guys with radar equipment, dog handlers, and everything. And we just hit obstruction after obstruction. And when you look at the police's investigation, it was so monumentally flawed. One boy, they never even put it down to murder. One boy went missing when this Brian Fields was living in this area in the West Midlands. He'd moved from Surrey, where he'd murdered a kid, made his way to the Midlands. This boy goes missing, young 8-year-old lad, and he was on his way to the bank to deposit money in his little kiddie's account. Never seen again, And then a few days later, a week later or so, his body was found hanging in the woods. The police said it was suicide. The kid had special educational needs. They classed that he was probably depressed and killed himself. But the knot that was placed around the kid's neck, the kid couldn't even do up his shoelaces. He was dyspraxic. He didn't have the motor skills. And he was planning his future. He was putting money in an account, which shows forward planning. It doesn't show, well, what's the point? I'm going to be dead tomorrow. I'm going to kill myself, which is the usual mindset. So you think, how would they even think like that? But what gave it away was the kid's hands were tied, and the noose that was around his neck was tied in a sophisticated maritime knot. Well, Brian Lunn was a Royal Marine and would have done knots as part of his tradecraft, to get his water skills, and everything else, and they put it down to the kids. So, so what I'm saying is it's this blinkered attitude. And then we've got to look at these people are connected. Brian Fields spent time in prison with a member of Sidney Cook's gang, right? I can't remember which one it was, Leslie Bailey or one of them, was in prison with the guy, shared the same cell. Sidney Cook was accused of the murder of 9 young men. And then when Sidney Cook was facing trial for the murder, it was reduced to the manslaughter of 2 young children, 2 manslaughter. He did his time, was released, and then went on to commit sex crimes again. So they're non-stop, and it doesn't matter whether it's a girl or a boy. They call them trisexuals. They will try anything. So you've got to understand that mindset, and timing is everything. Look at the dates and the locations Where the bodies are found is another one. They're usually buried at a place where a suspect, a murderer, is comfortable. They're comfortable in a certain place, which they'll usually know from childhood.
That goes into one of the suspects in the Bible John killings is Peter Tobin, as we said.
Yeah.
So the net started to close in on him. I'm sure it was back in 2007 when he murdered Polish student Angelika Kluk in Glasgow in the church. And that would then lead on to another 2 bodies being found at his home in Margate.
Kent, in Kent.
As you said, close, comfortable.
They're comfortable. They know that they've got time.
Those two girls was Vicky Hamilton, who'd went missing in the early 90s in Bathgate, and Dana McNichol, I'm sure.
Right.
I'll get the name right. Again, that went missing from a festival down south, but the 2 of them were buried in the same back garden.
Yeah. And again, it would have may have been an opportunistic abduction. Like we mentioned in a previous episode, people like Wayne Couzens, you've got this mindset, they've got this fantasy, and then the opportunity arrives. But it could maybe spurred on by a date, a significant date. And that could be a date of trauma, a date of celebration, something. But dates will be important, and locations will be massively important, and this is where the science of profiling does come in. It's not a be-all and end-all, and it is an opinion, but it's something, I think there should be a national unit that looks at all of these cases, all of them. It should be taken away. All right, individual forces have ownership, but it should be shared, and the information should be made available to law enforcement where they can sit down and plot out. I mean, look at AI now. Surely there must be an AI program you can shovel this in and it will come up with it. I think you're probably going to find some cracking detectives come out of just using sort of AI programs and all that now. But these people would have come to notice. I mean, Tobin was a sadistical, evil man. I think that a lot of these people are connected. I think that they get together, and we don't know how these people die. There will be traces of rape and strangulation, maybe, but how and when? I mean, maybe they're taken to places where it's a joint effort, and they can, like the young boy Jason Swift, who was abducted from the street, taken to a party where man after man after man, buggered him to death, drugged him and buggered him, brutalized him, and why would 9 missing people, 9 suspected murders be reduced down to 2 to the lesser charge of manslaughter? Why? And there was all weird stuff went on around Sidney Cook. Even his sentence was reduced on an appeal. And then you start getting intervention from the Home Office and things like that, obstructing. Now, I made contact with a former profiler for the FBI in regards to Brian Fields. There was, officially, the police said Brian Fields could be responsible for up to 30 murders of young men, right? Unaccounted for, missing young men. Right, that matched it, and they had some information which they didn't want to share, that there could be 30 murders. So I contacted an FBI profiler who said, well, if you can get a visiting order or a legal visit, he was in Wakefield prison, Monster Mansions as I call it, we'll go up there and we'll interview him, because these people, they're isolated, they're no longer with their little community, and they're old and they're dying, and sometimes they offload. And if you do that, you might find out that what they've been convicted for, there's many, many more. Okay? So I made an application to the Home Office. I found out where he was. I wrote a letter to him with the suggestion. I put it very bold, this is what we'd like to do. Would you be in any way willing to assist us. I didn't hear anything, so I wrote another letter. And the next thing, I get a letter through from the Home Office, from a prosecutions team from the Home Office, threatening me with arrest and prosecution for harassment if I ever contact Brian Fields again. So I contacted the author of this letter. I said, did you get my previous letters? We did, but he didn't. And I went, well, why did you not pass them on? They said, look, we've been told to tell you, stay away. And then he died. A year later, he died. So it was all lost. But there was something blocking us from sitting down independently and speaking with him. Something was blocking us. Why? Why would you do that? Because there's a commodity in these children. There's a need for it. And this is what links into paedophile rings. And which will link in, maybe it's a conspiracy, maybe there's truth in it. But the case of Marc Dutroux in Belgium, the Beast of Belgium, will dictate that there's not a conspiracy here, a theory, that this really is a reality, that children and young girls and boys are abducted for sex parties, which will end up with murderous intent. And Marc Dutroux proved that, where the young girls were taken from the streets of Belgium, abducted, kept in cages underground in his house, of which they found 2 properties with these cages in there, with kids in there. And they were taken to parties, and the girls all said, look, yeah, Mark was a pervert, but he weren't the worst. It was the businessmen, the politicians, and one girl even named a member of the royal family. There was even allegations that the cardinal for Belgium was at the time it was involved in it. There was allegations. That's what I was told, and the Belgian government covered it all up. When the police did raid the house, they found this door, and there was an electrician was called in. They found it was like a false door with a bookshelf. And he said, I can hear screams. And the detective went, no, you can't, it's next door neighbours, and called the search off. And 2 girls were in there. Marc Dutroux was arrested for stealing a car and put in prison. And of course, there were 2 girls in there, they starved to death in there, yeah. And the Belgian government covered this up because it involved politicians. The people of Belgium, they couldn't fob them off. There was a fireman who's one of the victims was his relative, and he just said, we can't allow this. So they went with their fire engine and they blasted the windows out of Parliament in Brussels. This was in the mid-90s, blew out all the windows. 1 million people took to the streets, brought Belgium to a standstill. And then it got out. But Marc Dutroux got sent away for murder. His co-defendant was murdered suspiciously. He died. There was 90, this is a bizarre thing, 90 civilian witnesses were involved in accidents, and most of them fatal in the lead up to the trial. A leading journalist was murdered. A police officer was removed. The judge that was originally appointed was taken off, and a magistrate with 2 years' experience was put in charge of the biggest case going. It was the biggest cover-up you can imagine. No one other than Dutroux, his wife, and his friend were ever prosecuted for it. Yet the girls said, no, it was his politicians. Some of them knew them from telly. And that's where it went to. Now, when we get these missing children and these abductions, why can't we start looking at maybe there is a bigger thing? And if they're getting away with it for so long, would it not indicate that they're being protected in some way? Now, I'm not taking it away from the fact that this could be individual opportunistic killers, but you've got to start looking at this could be a bigger organised racket going on that is allowed to occur. I mean, no one can't tell me that there is a conspiracy of silence, because I've been involved in one. I've been involved in one where children were trafficked out, were raped, 2 of them were murdered, and there was a police officer involved. I'm living proof that went on. And the police, well, what they did to me at a certain level, and certain individuals went out their way to silence me with threats and actions to imprison me and take my children off me. So it goes on. I'm in no way a conspiracy theorist. I'm not. But it happens. But we see, again, it's the patterns, it's algorithms. We see it all the time. And when you look, that Bible John might be two different people. It might be one. It might be three people. Why are they not looking at it like that? You know, say you've got Sinclair named, you've got Tobin named, you know.
Again, with Angus Sinclair, he would then go on to be convicted of another 2 murders known as the World's End killings.
Yeah, it's in Edinburgh, wasn't it?
Edinburgh, and 2 girls were only 17 years old. Christine Eady.
Were they abducted from a party or something after leaving
Helen
the pub?
Scott, no, from the pub.
Yeah.
And again, bearing the same MO, strangulation with the tights, rape, murder, discarded.
Yeah.
Exact same as Bible John. So looking at that, that's what I wanted to ask you anyway. Since we went through the case together, who do you think is Bible John?
Well, I if you look at Tobin, because you've got that ecclesiastical connection, you've got the fact that the Polish girl, and from what I recall, I think she was actually stored under the floorboards of the church. He got himself involved in that community, the church community. So he could be a very, very strong suspect. Do you know what I mean? But then you've got this other one in the Barrowlands, which would go around and preaching Christianity. There's a guy, his name's going to come to me in a minute. I can see his face. There's a documentary was made about him. And inadvertently, it started off showing the benevolence of this fella, Roger Gleaves. Roger Gleaves. Roger Gleaves became a bishop. It was a self-appointed bishop. Bishop of Medway, which, funny enough, is Medway is not far from where Tobin lived, right? Same period of time, exactly the same period of time, 70s that time. Roger Gleaves set himself up as this protector of homeless runaways, right? And he would go around the streets of London, and when kids would run away, mainly from Scotland and the north, and make their way to Euston and King's Cross, he'd set up little soup vans, pick them up, and say, look, it's a dangerous place. We're here to help. We can give you soup and we can get you somewhere to live. And the camera crew went out with him, and the police would even help him. And he had this makeshift uniform. It's a bit like something out Only Fools and Horses, where it's like he'd got hold of some sort of traffic warding uniform, but made out, give himself this I don't know, like community service officer or something like that, and a rank and a peak cap. And he'd go and pick these boys up. He was taking them to get their benefit, and he was murdering them and raping them. And he'd been doing it for years and years and years and years. But he would also run churches. You know, he'd set up these missions, these churches, and people think he was doing God's work. But he weren't. He was a sadistic child murdering pimp, and got away with it by hiding under that illusion of decency and the ecclesiastical sort of setting that went with it. You know, and he had connections all over the country doing the same thing, going around and preaching the Bible and Christian values. And Gleaves was also involved with priests. And they would pick young boys up and give them Bible lessons and then just rape them. You know, one of the victims come to me. One of the victims was a senior officer with the Kent Constabulary with the police. And he contacted me and said, look, I was one of Gleaves' victims. And he said he could get me into the police, he could help me, then use it through the church, send me to Christian camps. But it was just, like, we're like rent boys, we're just abused, we're just raped. And, you know, we didn't have anyone else. And they would pick on that. Now, their vulnerability was the fact that they had unstable families and wanted to do good in life, and he picked on that. But it's the same as girls at a party that are drunk, the same, you know, and someone proclaiming to be from the church comes along and I'll get you home and I'll get you. And then they're never seen again because the opportunity has now satisfied their fetish. You know what I mean? Their intention, their fantasies now been satisfied. And it's only going to end in one way, and that's murder. And that grooming, that pretense of this nice Christian man will drop in a heartbeat. It will bang, it will go in a heartbeat, and the monster will come out. There was a really interesting therapy session that they did at a sex offenders unit, and it was filmed, and I used to go and watch these sessions, and they'd sit around and they're giving a guy put in his chair, and a paedophile, and another paedophile. His brief is, talk him out of that chair, charm him out of that chair. Do whatever you can, charm him out of that chair. And the guy in the chair's briefing is, no matter what, stay in the chair. So, and they film it, and it's to show the grooming process and the monster within these people. And then a guy would come up, oh, how are you? Do you want a cigarette? Chatting him up, basically, you know. How you doing? I bet you'll talk, stand up, using every trick and manipulation they can. But there'll come a point where it ain't working and the monster comes out. And the next thing, what the paedophile who's trying to get him out of the chair will do, will just attack, you know, and then they have to steam in and break it up. And it's, they call it sublimation. It will go from a solid to a gas like that, you know, without the liquid phase. It will just go from one extreme to the other. So it'll go from charming, nice, when they don't get what they want, or they do get what they want, the outcome's the same, pure violence and evil. Bang. And this is what will be with them. It will be a glaze over. And what was very interesting was in the documentary they did about Russell Brand. And one of the women was saying that he was trying to have sex with me or something. I can't quote it. But when I resisted, his eyes went black and he'd become horrible. He'd become evil in a heartbeat. Well, dangerous, you know? Dangerous. What is that? Psychopathy, demonic possession? Who knows? But does it matter? Because it's still a monster. And this is what happens. This is when you see. I interviewed a woman called Tracy Connolly. Tracy Connolly, criminally, is very infamous in London because she was involved in the death, the brutal killing and torture of her son, Baby P, Peter Connolly. Right, so it was a Baby P murder, very well known down there. And I had the misfortune, whatever you call it, to interview this woman. And I experienced it. I listened to this woman's lies, her charm, about telling me what a good mum she was. So it wasn't her that hurt the child. It was just lies and manipulation, layer after layer. And I went along with it because it was prudent for me to do that. But at some point, I'm going to now upset the status quo and challenge her on a narrative because she's talking bullshit. She's a liar. Well, I can't tell her at the beginning because I need her to lie her way through and stitch herself up. So I listened to her lies, her grooming. She was trying to groom me with her lies of deception, what a good mum she was. You know, this is all a conspiracy against her. Her child bruises easy. Their injuries are nothing to do with her. Even they're minor. They're not even an injury. It's just because of his condition, which didn't exist. You know, he was suffering appalling injuries. And there was a testimony and an examination from a paediatric professional, one of the best paediatric doctors in the Western world, had examined these child injuries and given a report stating that these was a result of high impact trauma, such as punches, kicks, and everything else. Totally contrary to her shit. But I wasn't going to bring that in till the end when I had to then challenge her. And the moment I challenged her, wow, bang, change was phenomenal. Went from this charmy, smiley to, you see you next Tuesday, spitting, everything, wild. And I said, yeah, that's the monster your son sees. Game over for her. But it's the same as these people. Yeah, look, I'll give you a lift home. I'll make sure you get home. They just want to strangle, rape, and that's it.
A great example is the American serial killer, Ted Bundy.
Mm-hmm.
He was very charming. He was a good-looking guy, and he would use that to his advantage. But one of his survivors said the exact same thing. I think he tried to kidnap her in the car. The whole face changed.
Straight away.
Black eyes.
Yeah.
Monster.
Monster, yeah, it is.
But yet he can represent himself in court as a charming character.
Yeah, highly intelligent.
Very dangerous.
Yeah, very dangerous, yeah. And but not only that, they're predictable. And those that know what they're dealing with, they will be able to predict them. They're a brilliant woman called Corinne Hutsterbart, Belgian profiler. Fantastic. She's caught 2 serial killers on her own. The police were running around chasing their tail, and she told them who it was. She told the team in Belgium about Marc Dutroux, who he was 2 years before he was caught. But there was a serial killer in France was going around doing the same, abducting young women and killing them. They didn't know who he was. They didn't know where he was, what he was. So she gets asked, just have a look at it, see what we can say. She looks at it straight away. She says, he's a policeman. They're like, what? He's a policeman. But he won't wear uniform. He'll be a detective. Like, how do you know? I'm telling you now. And then she explains it, how the bodies were, where they were laying. She said, even where the bodies are denotes, what's going on. It's a crime scene. It's telling you everything. You can tell if it's an inexperienced murderer because they'll do juvenile things. It's like a burglary. Juveniles will throw everything. They might wee everywhere. It's just immature how they go about anything. There's no structure to it. It's chaotic. And it's the same when they kill. How will they leave the body? Will they leave it in the open for people to see? Chaotic. It means they've been disturbed. It means they've not thought it out. Or is it hidden? Is it laying face down? So if it's laying face down in some way that's protecting dignity, or is it laying there with the legs open, with the knickers off? That's to humiliate, And there's all these things that are very, very important, that needs to be taken. And this is what they should be looking at, not just the body, where. Like I said to you before, the date, the time, but going back to Corinne, it was where one of the bodies were. She said only a policeman could get access to that. But if he was in uniform, someone would say so. So it would be a man that would be wearing his plain clothes. And she knew that it was done in darkness, and she explained it. I can't really go through too much because there's a lot to it. But she then, they said, well, what do we do? And she said, well, what you've got to do, he'll be based in Paris. He'll be a Parisian detective. And then she gives her reasons for that as well, because of the location, the geographical profiling and everything else. And she said, call everyone in to be DNA tested. And the one who books a holiday, it's him. So they called in 2,000, 20,000, I don't know how many, there are thousands. Everyone is going to be DNA tested. Every detective. You're to present yourself. Yeah. And then they recorded, who was it? And one guy puts in his annual leave. And he fucks off. And he goes down to Marseille. And she says, it's him. Went down, caught him, and he admitted it straight away. And they were like, how did it? But it was based on common sense.
When was that, John?
There's a documentary on it. I think it was about 6 years ago. And he was the biggest serial killer in France. And she caught him. And she just explained exactly how she goes about it. And I offered the services of this woman to West Midlands Police in respect to 2 children that were missing. And they didn't want to know. Weren't interested. So that's one of the things I was doing, was going on to these cold cases that are unsolved and saying, look, can you allow us to help in any way? And we can go and look at this if you don't want to deal with it. What harm would it do? But we need access to some of the information, and we need to sit down with the people in the prisons and talk to them. No. So, there is a need for this. So with the Bible John thing, it would need a profiler, in my opinion. And I think all these unsolved murders to look at it in the fresh eyes. Look at the location. Even if you don't think that they're connected, they may well be connected, and look at their movements and look at the dates and the patterns that is there. You just can't see it, but it is there in front of you. Who knows? But, they could be 2 people. Bible John could be 2 people. Could be 3 people. But I mean, Tobin's dead now, as far as I'm aware.
That's right.
He died not so long ago.
So is Sinclair, I'm sure.
Yeah, and what missed opportunities? There was a case in Brazil of street kids being murdered, being rounded up and just shot. And there's rumours that the police were doing it because the favelas in Rio, the kids were going down and just robbing the tourists. It was affecting the tourism trade to a massive detriment. So what the police were allegedly doing was going out there in the van at night, picking up the little street kids, the bag thieves and the drug dealers, shooting them, just dumping their bodies, going around in this black van. It was all unofficial. No one knew about it. Everyone denied it. They would have got away with it had the officer in charge of the unit, one day he had a revelation from God and said, "You're not to do this anymore, and you're to speak up." And he grasped them all up and said, "Yeah, we have been doing it." Grasped every single one up. So what was a myth, was actually a reality. They were doing it. And you do get these dying declarations, these deathbed confessions. You do get them. And people do want to purge themselves. They might be the most abhorrent person going. But you'll get people, I don't know how you can do it, sit down with a paedophile, sit down. But what if Peter Tobin or Sinclair, horrible paedophilic murderers, were to say, "I want Jim to come and chat, I want to chat with him." And he was going to then not only tell him about the ones he's done, but others, because there will be more. There's always more. There's so many people going missing, believed and thought to be working abroad or homeless on the street. And, well, I don't know, last thing I know, they was on the street. They get picked up. They get killed. Would you not swallow your pride and say, "Yeah, I talked to him"? Well, it means shaking his hand. Well, so what? You have a cup of tea with him, so what? I can put an end to this. I can give healing to the families. We can put these souls to bed. I'd do it. I'd do it in a heartbeat. But you go in there and kick the daylights out of him, say, "Right, we're going to torture him until he tells us. And if he don't, we're going to torture him and kill him anyway." You're going to get nothing but lies out of him. He'll admit to anything. You torture him, wouldn't you? He'd admit to the D-Day landings, wouldn't he? And so it's not going to get you anywhere. That's not going to do it. But sometimes there is another approach, But you've got to always be mindful when you're talking to these people that they're after something and they don't like you. You're not their friend. Like I said on an earlier episode to you, I work with violent offenders and sex offenders. And once they've completed their course with me, the violent offenders shake my hand. Say, "Thanks, I appreciate it. I appreciate your lack of judgment. I appreciate the time you've taken. You treat me like a gentleman. I thank you for it." The paedophiles just get up and walk off because they don't care. They're selfish.
As you said, they've got what they want.
Got what they want. Narcissism, right, is not having any love or too much love. You spoil a kid, you fuck that kid up. You don't give that kid any love, and in a kid's home, they're not going to get any love, right? But it's a gateway to psychopathy because it's pure selfishness. It's like the bird coming back with the worms, and it's the one who chirps loudest, "Me, me, me, me." They'll get it. Don't care about their siblings. They'll eat all the worms, one of them, and won't. But it's the same as kids. They need to be selfish to survive. But if you don't regulate that and teach them the right way, it grows in them and grows in them and grows in them, and they become horrible and they become psychopathic. And it's the same if you abuse them and hurt them, they're going to go into survival mode and it's going to be them and them alone. I'm not saying that survivors of abuse go on to become psychopaths, but those that are psychopaths will be survivors of abuse. They will be. And that's what you've got to look at. So there'll be a pattern in their past. They would have come to notice as juveniles. There would have been delinquency and deviant behaviour. It would have been there. The pattern's there. And again, with the tights, there is a significance in the tights. It's an undergarment, but also it doubles up as a ligature. Why strangle someone? Well, they strangle them because it heightens that thing, the body will tense and contort and that will squeeze and, the organs will squeeze, the vagina will squeeze and they'll kill them while raping them. And it'll give them that, and it also give them the power over life and death. There was one child murderer and what he would do, he would strangle kids and then do CPR on them, bring them back to life because it gave him a power that can control life, And that's why you get people in the medical industry, like doctors and all that will because they've got a power over life and death, and it's power. There's so many levels, but there's always an audit trail, always. And it's there. It's there. And especially with prolific people like that, the police do these anniversary visits. Dennis Nielsen would be visited every single year by the same copper, but he never told him anything. Well, maybe it's time to use a different copper with a different stance, but they will go and visit them, but if it's not getting the result, well, why carry on doing it? Use a different stance. There might be another way around there, but some, they hold into it like it's that power that they hold on to, but there was this profile of Corinne. It was an infamous murder. It might have been in the UK, and she was asked her opinion, and they took someone out of prison to go and look for where he'd buried the bodies, and they took this guy to a field, and he's standing there and he's looking around, and he chooses where to stop, and when he gets out there, he says, I can't remember where I buried them, but he's smiling, and she's watching it. She says to the police officer, well, what did you do about it? She went, well, nothing, he couldn't remember. She said, are you that stupid? He's smiling. He knows something you don't. I'm like, well, yeah, what can we do about it? She said, you can go back to that site and you dig in the exact spot he's standing. He's standing on the burial site and he's happy to be standing there. He's excited. He's smiling because he's got an erection. They went and with the exact site, dug down and found a body. That was in the UK, that happened. Because she had the mindset. She knew that mind. And she said, look, he's excited, he's smiling. Why do you not? But they're not teaching them this, you see? They should be teaching them this lateral thinking. It's not, or sometimes it's always that professional, and they think because they've been a detective for 20 years, they know everything. Oh, and it breeds an arrogance, And like, no, come on now. This isn't about you and how long your chain is, like the prison officers out. It's not about that. It's about how good you can do your job. And if you're not caught them, you're not doing your job well. And how good have the police been in that? They've not done their job properly. So.
It's always great to sit and listen, John. As I always say, very fascinating character. But before we finish up in this episode, if there's another message you can send out, now's the time.
Yeah. I mean, I always have a message, and I'm on a project at the moment. I'm on a plan, a new piece of work. And I said this on an earlier one, and I want to call out to the survivors of these big institutions in Scotland. The Scottish Independent Inquiry against child sexual abuse has concluded, but it was a bit of a farce and a bit of a whitewash. And I'm very interested in this character, Lord Nicholas Fairbairn, and this other character, Dirty Bob Henderson QC. Both barristers, and Nicholas Fairbairn was in charge of the Scottish judicial system, and he was a prolific paedophilic rapist of young girls that were in care homes, especially one in Perthshire called Forneath. And really, I would like to see how many would be interested in doing testimonies about their time in this home, and if they remember this guy. It would be interesting, and I think it would make a fascinating piece of work that might actually change the judicial outcome and make the inquiry look at this with a different set of eyes. That this isn't something we cover up. They always give us the low-hanging fruit. The people of Scotland survivors have been given one woman that was senior teacher that was neglectful, willfully neglect, and didn't serve any time in prison at all, was given a community service order. Well, it's not good enough. How many suicides have come? How many alcoholics have been produced by this place, heroin addicts, domestic violence abusers, and survivors because of the trauma of childhood. How many kids have been put into care because their mothers can't look after them properly, because of their past, and ultimately, you know, how many people have taken their lives because they've been to this school. And I think the survivors of this home and a few others in Scotland deserve better. And if I can in any way help and put a bit of work together that, you know, factually based and maybe with some evidential worth that we can present independently to the system to say, or even to the PF up here and say, look, please, isn't it worth a little look? Because there have been some great documentaries that have changed things. And we've already got one result in having a new fresh set of eyes looked at a 50-year-old historic murder in Belfast, that of Brian McDermott, and maybe we can do the same with this, you know. So that's it. The survivors of Forneath, please, if you want to get in touch, you know.
Great message, John, as always. Thanks again. Just push
God
that mic out.
bless you.
God bless you, John.
Thank you. Cheers. Till the next time.
Next time. Take care, my friend.